Hey everybody, my name is Paul Eston Jr., aka Boy Green, and welcome to my YouTube channel. YouTube.com/BoyGreen25. BOY Green the color 25. If you like what you see, make sure you give this channel a big subscribe and also give us a thumbs up. We'd appreciate it. It's time to fix the New York Jets, my free agency edition. And folks, it's the most exciting time of the year for Jet fans normally, and that's the offseason. But last year, it was all boring. The Jets didn't sign anybody. It wasn't sexy. And then, of course, the Jets had a 2-14 season, one of the worst years in franchise history. Now, it's time to spend that moolah, spend that money. Right now, the New York Jets have around $67 million in cap space. Again, $67 million, and that includes Marcus May's franchise tag that just came in last week as well. So what I'm going to do for this YouTube video is, quote, fix the New York Jets, the free agency edition. And I want you guys to keep a couple things in mind as we're working our way through this. First off, Rome wasn't built in a day. The Jets are not going to be able to get every top free agent at every position. Shocking, I know. But what I hope to do is to be able to break down some of the top needs. We'll do that in a second. Some of the moves I would make before free agency even starts, the names I would target, and what some of those contracts could look like. We're going to try to fix the New York Jets a little with what I think is going to happen and a little bit of mixing in what I would do if I was making the decisions at One Jets Drive. Again, I hope you guys can enjoy the video. And also, if there's someone I blatantly missed, make sure you drop it in the comments down below. And also just yell at me and let me know what you think about the signings that you think are stupid and also ones that you agree with, if there are any of those. With that being said, let's dive right in. First off, right off the bat, I'm cutting Alex Lewis and creating an additional $5.4 million in cap space. That would put the team around $72 million. Here's the thing. The Jets' interior offensive line sucks. So we'll get into the needs in just a second before we get into all the names. But this is a move I'm doing immediately. But I'm not cutting Alex Van Roten as well because I want to know what I could get in free agency. And as we'll talk about in a minute, I don't want to create any additional holes on the Jets roster. They have enough holes as is. But Alex Lewis is a position I anticipate the Jets replacing either through free agency, the draft, or quite frankly, both. So he's just a guy I'm immediately getting rid of. It was a cool flyer by Joe Douglas, and it worked for a year. You pay him a lot of money, and it just hasn't worked out the way they would have wanted. So I'm immediately moving on from him. And here's what Joe Douglas said about free agency before free agency even began at his presser last week. He said, quote, "We're better positioned than we were this time last year. I would say that our philosophy and stance has not changed. However, our goal and our plan is to be a team that really builds this thing through the draft and hitting on draft picks, obviously using free agency to supplement our roster," end quote. And a lot of people have kind of overreacted to this quote. Of course, he wants to build through the draft. That's something I think all of us want to do. But another comment he made is they would be willing to be aggressive, quote, if the opportunity and the value meet in free agency. So with that being said, again, I'm going to break down all the signings, the players I would go after in free agency. And of course, it's always exciting to spend someone else's money. But before we get into that, I want to address some of the top needs for the Jets in no particular order, going through this before we dive into the free agency pool. First off, quarterback, obviously. Sam Darnold has been a major question mark in his first 3 years in the league, and the Jets and Joe Flacco, obviously, is either going to retire or move on to a different team as a pending free agent, and James Morgan was inactive for every game of the year. So obviously, quarterback is a question mark, but the Jets aren't going to address that in free agency. There is no option that will be available in free agency that could fill the hole or cause them to move in one way or another. So quarterback is a huge need, but they won't address that in free agency. Edge rusher, for God's sakes, insert the John Abraham jokes, Jet fans. They haven't had an edge rusher since John Abraham, and they need edge rushers, and quite frankly, I think they need multiple, foreshadowing for later in the video. Another one, interior offensive line. That's where the Jets have issues. Offensive tackle is fine, and we'll get into that in a second. The interior offensive line is mediocre at best, and they need to move on. Again, I would immediately move on from Alex Lewis, and I would potentially move on from Greg Van Roten, depending on what they do. Again, more on that in a little bit. Cornerback. As much as some of us Jet fans are in love with guys like Bless Austin or Bryce Hall, you can't rely on those guys to be starters. That's how you get picked apart during the next season. The Jets need players at the quarterback position. I expect them to address that, again, both in free agency and the 2021 NFL Draft. Wide receiver, obviously, the Jets have had bums at wide receiver, CFL guys, XFL guys, and lacrosse players. I mean, come on. Chris Hogan, for God's sakes, can we give whoever is playing quarterback for the Jets a legitimate guy to throw to? We will in this video. A coverage linebacker. In this new Robert Saleh scheme, you're going to need linebackers who can cover. And quite frankly, in any scheme, you need linebackers that can cover. So we're going to address that. Running back. The Jets need more bodies in there. Tight end. Chris Herndon's a big question mark. So those are some of the positions. And really, if you wanted to boil it down to this, really every position on the team for the New York Jets needs some sort of help outside of interior defensive line. I think they've got ample depth there with guys like Foley Fatukasi and Quinnen Williams and others. Again, they've got so many pieces. I would probably ignore that position entirely, quite frankly, in free agency and the draft. They're fine there. Offensive tackle, I think they're good. Now, Mckay Beckton obviously is a blue chip player that you hope is going to be your left tackle for the next decade plus. And George Fant, who apparently every Jet fan in the world is crapping on left and right, he was fine. And again, I think he's going to project even better in this scheme and maximize his athleticism. And again, as I said earlier, why I'm not willing to just cut players left and right before free agency starts. The Jets have enough needs as is. They don't need to create more. George Fant is fine at right tackle for this year. Mckay Beckton obviously is great at left tackle. So all these people that are projecting the Jets cut George Fant and grab a Mitchell Schwartz who was released by the Kansas City Chiefs or what have you, to me, I think, again, we're playing too much Madden here. The George Fant signing was fantastic last year because it was better than all of our expectations, which were crap, and I thought he was very serviceable last year. So I'm not creating an additional hole. So again, interior defensive line, we're good. Offensive tackle, we're good. I'd love to draft a future right tackle potentially and develop him behind Fant this year, but that's besides the point. Now let's get into it here. Let's talk some free agent signings. And first off, it starts on Monday, March 15th through the 17th through Wednesday is the legal tampering period. And what is the legal tampering period? That's when teams can communicate with agents and players and talk about deals. Now, technically, they're not supposed to sign any deals, wink, wink, but they normally agree to it in principle, and then as soon as 4 o'clock hits on March 17th, deals are starting to be reported left and right because all the deals are ready, and as soon as it's official to go through, they often do. So the legal tampering period, again, is coming up on March 15th. But normally, in a non-COVID year, you could be waiting at a guy's house at midnight, waiting for the legal tampering period to start, and then you could just give your sales pitch to him. Now, obviously, with everything going on with COVID, that's not going to happen. But the player that I would be, if I'm the New York Jets, the first and number one player, I'm going to be waiting in his Zoom meeting. I'm going to be waiting in the Zoom chat room, going, come on, admit me to the room. Let me go. Let's go. At midnight, I would. That's Joe Thune, guard for the New England Patriots. And guys, this isn't a surprising thing, but to me, it's time to pay up. It's time to add a premier piece to this offensive line. Joe Douglas is a former offensive lineman. He understands the importance of the position and protecting whoever the hell is playing quarterback for the New York Jets next year. And here's some just statistics on Joe Thune. In the first 5 years of his career, Joe Thune has played every single game, 80 for 80. That's the kind of consistency I'm paying for. That kind of consistency not often reaches free agency. So from a health standpoint, an elite play standpoint, and an immediate plug and play to replace Alex Lewis at left guard, that's like going from chicken shit to like filet mignon. I mean, that is the difference between like an Alex Lewis and a Joe Thune. And as Damian Woody said on the Badlands podcast with Connor Rogers, Joe Caporoso, Joe Thune immediately plugging in at left guard will improve the play of Mckay Beckton. He can trust who's right next to him. It will improve the play of Connor McGovern. Joe Thune will be pricey. I think the deal will range anywhere from $14 million per year upwards to $16 million per year. And also the spot track market value is at around $15 million per year. So it'll be somewhere in that ballpark. And again, that is pricey for a guard. This is worth it in this unique scenario. I'm basically penciling in Jets and Joe Thune happening in free agency. I think it just makes too much sense. Again, the Jets have the second most cap space in the league, and this could have a major ripple effect on the rest of the offensive line. Let's stay on the offensive line. So we've just added Joe Thune. Fantastic. What else can we do? Again, I brought up the questions about right guard. Like Greg Van Roten was average, mediocre last year, closer to mediocre. So let's get some competition. Now, here's a name you probably haven't heard a lot, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Kyle Long, veteran, who's played a long time in the league at right guard. He recently was retired. And Joe Douglas has a weird hard-on for getting guys that were retired and bringing them back. Ryan Khalil. So Plus, there were reports last year from a reporter who shall not be named that worked at the New York Daily News, and he referenced the potential communication between Kyle Long and the New York Jets. So there's previous history here. The Jets need some competition at right guard. Again, I wouldn't believe in Kyle Long stepping in day one starter, but he's a guy bringing his competition at the very least for Greg Van Roten. And if I'm the Jets, I would potentially even draft a guy. Obviously, the Jets have the second pick. You're not drafting a guard there. 23, maybe. 34, definitely possible, like a Trey Smith of Tennessee or what have you at guard. So that's something I would consider. But Kyle Long, again, he's a guy who's a veteran. He has experience. There's a lot of injuries, but I bring him in as a depth piece. That never hurts. So that's what I would do on the offensive line. Again, bring in a guy like Kyle Long and then bring in a little bit of Joe Thune. And if they went that path, they being the Jets, you'd likely keep Connor McGovern at center. But there's always a chance if you bring in a high-quality center, Corey Linsley, or you bring in David Andrews from the Patriots, and you could kick Connor McGovern to guard. That can hit two birds with one stone. So I'd understand if Joe Douglas went that direction. Let's jump to wide receiver. Now, most of the sexy names, unfortunately, were tagged. Guys like Chris Godwin, we would have loved. Allen Robinson, we would have loved. But a couple of names shook free. Kenny Galladay of the Detroit Lions. Kenny Galladay, Juju Smith-Schuster, of the Steelers. Curtis Samuel, who was never really a threat to be tagged, but those are some of the receivers that slipped out there. And one thing I would consider here, now I'm not pulling the trigger on this, but I think it's something to keep in the back of your mind, Jet fans. So Allen Robinson was tagged by the Bears. He hates it there. He wants to get paid, and the Bears, and it's all awkward over there. Great stuff from Ty Dunn, kind of digging into the history between the Bears and Allen Robinson. If you're the Jets, do you call up the Bears and consider a tag and trade where you give Sam Darnold to the Bears, who are desperate for a quarterback? The Jets get back an alpha #1 wide receiver. And I think the Jets would need a little bit more than that. Now, some people may think that's crazy, but, Allen Robinson, you have to pay to trade an asset and pay for him. That's going to have to be costly on the other side. So I'm not saying that happens. I'm not projecting it to happen, but keep an eye out for it. Just to say we mentioned it here on the show. But staying at wide receiver, I think the Jets will seriously consider going after a guy like Kenny Galladay. But I think ultimately the price range is going to get too high. Joe Douglas is going to be like, nah, it's too much money. I'm out. And also the injury history of Kenny Galladay. So I think he drops out of that. And I think he goes with plan B, which may actually be plan A for a lot of Jet fans. What about Curtis Samuel, the Swiss Army knife from the Carolina Panthers? A lot of Jet fans have been making this comparison between Curtis Samuel and this offense, the Deebo Samuel-like role he could potentially have. To me, that makes a ton of sense. And actually, the money is actually fantastic. Market value says a little over $12 million per year on a multi-year deal, which is vastly different than the top of the market. Allen Robinson's $20 million a year. Again, he got franchise tag, but you get the point. The top of the receiver market is $20 million per year plus. If you get Curtis Samuel, who I think you could get a ton of production out of for $8 million per year less, that may be the Joe Douglas strategy. And plus, if you get a Curtis Samuel in free agency, maybe on the other side you can add another piece during the 2021 NFL draft. Again, you can't build all of Rome in there. And here's a little nugget for you. Again, a little nugget to little nibble on here. Don't be surprised if all the smoke around Will Fuller and the New York Jets is real. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN said Will Fuller is, quote, high on Joe Douglas's list heading into free agency. Now, the injuries scare the hell out of me, plus he'll be suspended for the first game of the 2021 season, but I could see this being Joe Douglas's type. We've all had types, when you were in college and dating all these different girls and you had a certain type, a blonde, a brunette, whatever your type was. I think Joe Douglas's type is the speedster. And this, if he potentially signed Will Fuller, would be the Robbie Anderson wannabe. Like he missed out on, like he dumped his girlfriend, Robbie Anderson. Now Robbie Anderson's with someone really attractive now, and Joe Douglas is having kind of regrets and going, boy, I wish I had him. Well, I could get the next best thing, which would be Will Fuller. Again, the injuries scare me there, but don't be surprised if the Jets make a heavy chase for Will Fuller. Now let's go to tight end. Now I think the Jets are going to flirt with the top of the market, Jonnu Smith, but I think he's going to be super costly. I think a lot of people are going to be in on Jonnu Smith. So I think the Jets, again, have a fallback option here, and they go with Gerald Everett, LA Rams. I think he's a super athletic tight end, could provide this offense another toy. And basically, in this free agent class, I think he's a poor man's version of Jonnu Smith, and you can get him a little bit below that value. Again, you can't trust Chris Herndon by himself. I would love to see Chris Herndon and Everett and kind of have a 1-2 punch there at tight end. I think that would be great. I'm going to go, and we're not working in order here. We're going kind of chronologically through the entire offense of where I would kind of address, and then we'll jump over to defense. So, again, you're going to hear some more big names a little bit later. But at running back, I'm going to add a body. I know there's Ty Johnson fans out there and Josh Adams and Michael P. Ryan, but let's be real, folks. There's a reason that these guys were either drafted or, in some cases, undrafted where they were. The Jets need a body. A guy who's a perfect schematic fit is Kenyon Drake. Of the Arizona Cardinals. I think he makes a lot of sense. Some other guys who could kick the tires on, Marlon Mack of the Indianapolis Colts, maybe even a Duke Johnson, who was released by the Texans. I think ultimately they end up with Drake on a short-term deal and throw him in the backfield with everybody else. Quickly, backup quarterback C.J. Beathard, name to watch. Joe Flacco, again, could either walk off into the sunset or move on as a free agent. C.J. Beathard knows the system. It just makes too much sense not to happen there at quarterback. Now, let's jump over to defense, baby. Let's sauce it up. Edge rusher. There are a lot of intriguing names on the free agent market. Shaq Barrett, Bud Dupree. But if I'm the Jets, the number one guy I'm calling is Carl Lawson of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, market value says it'll be a deal hanging around $9 million per year, but I think the open market is really going to raise up that spot track market price. He's young. He's 25, will be 26 by the start of the 2021 season. An elite player with limited opportunities he's had. And one of the things that really intrigues me on the next-gen stats analytics is he has one of the fastest pass rush get-offs of any player in the entire NFL last year. Now, one player won't solve the Jets' needs at edge, but bringing in a guy like Carl Lawson and going quote-unquote all in on him, I think is great and, quite frankly, a need in this Robert Saleh scheme. And, folks, I'm feeling froggy. Let's dive back into edge rusher again with the old discount double check, the old double dip, the chicken nugget, and I'm going with Trey Hendrickson of the New Orleans Saints. So we just grabbed Carl Lawson, phenomenal. Well, let's get another guy. And this may be an aggressive approach, but you know what? The Jets need edge rushers. They needed them for a long time. Let's double dip. And I anticipate the Jets doing that. Maybe it's not Lawson and Hendrickson. Maybe go Romeo Okwara of the Detroit Lions. Again, you have options. You can do this, but I hope they double dip because they really need it. But Trey Hendrickson, again, he's a player that popped last year. 13.5 sacks. You pair him along with Carl Lawson. And now Robert Saleh has some juice. He has some all gas, no break, if I may, on the defensive side of the ball. Now, the thing you have to ask yourself is Trey Hendrickson, is he a one-year wonder with the 13.5 sacks last year? Did he finally reach his potential? That's something the Jets front office is going to have to seriously consider. By the way, the money for Trey Hendrickson is averaging around $10 million per year. That's what Spot Track market value kind of says there. Let's go to cornerback. And this one, I think, is a foregone conclusion. I said that about Joe Thune earlier, just because of fit and Jets need and Jets interest. I think that's going to happen. Richard Sherman. I think the Jets and Richard Sherman are a foregone conclusion. Peter Panassi of Niner Noise joined me during the coaching search way back when. You could check out that video also on my YouTube channel. And he said that Richard Sherman is a player that would likely follow Robert Saleh wherever he goes, that he brought up the Jets as an example. And if you haven't watched a lot of 49ers games recently, you may think Richard Sherman has fallen off the hill. Now, he's not prime Richard Sherman, but he's still got a lot of gas left in the tank. And Sherman has said he wants to play another 2 years. That could be a perfect stopgap. And I got to give credit to Joe Caporoso for saying this, and I can't get it out of my head ever since he said it. It would be the Bart Scott-like schematic signing that Rex Ryan had when he came to the Jets. A guy that knows the scheme, a guy that's still got juice left in the tank, and can kind of spread the gospel, spread the leadership, spread the buy-in message of Robert Saleh to the rest of the team. And plus, quite frankly, the Jets need corners. And speaking of corners, I wouldn't stop there. Again, as much as us Jet fans like Bless Austin and Bryce Hall, you can't rely on those guys. So I expect the Jets to get another corner. Maybe not top of the market. Malcolm Butler, a veteran, was released from the Tennessee Titans. He would make sense. A low-flyer option as the opposite corner there as well. And speaking of the slot, Brian Poole makes a lot of sense to bring back again on another potential one-year deal as well. So I could imagine that. But there could be a lot of turnover at the cornerback position. And again, speaking of those kind of guys, the Jets need coverage linebackers in this scheme. Quan Alexander, who was released, he could actually sign ahead of free agency. And any player that was released, like Malcolm Butler and others, can sign ahead of free agency because they do not fall into the free agency rules. So let's kind of recap all of the names we kind of went through here to kind of bring us full circle. Joe Thune Guard, again, that deal is going to be between $14 and $16 million a year. I think it's more so on the higher side, but I'd love to be surprised if it'd be less. I think there's going to be a lot of competition for his services. Kyle Long, guard, incentive-laden deal, kind of a flyer. Throw him at right guard for competition. Curtis Samuel, you're adding him, $12 million a year. Gerald Everett at tight end, $7 million a year. Kenyon Drake, again, a low flyer, a veteran kind of throw a dart at the wall and see what happens as a schematic guy that wants another chance. Maybe even a 1-year deal. I think a 2-year deal would make sense. Again, sub $7 million, maybe $3 million a year, something like that. That would make a lot of sense, and maybe he could dip back into free agency next year when the TV deals are coming in a couple of years and get more money and maybe get a pop with the Jets. CJ Beathard, low-cost deal, backup quarterback. Carl Lawson, this is where we're diving back into the deeper end of the pool in terms of money. Lawson, $9 million plus per year. I think possibly even more than that. Trey Hendrickson, $10 million plus a year. And all these numbers I'm throwing at you, by the way, aren't just random dart throws. I kind of assess the spot track market value of every player and then what the Jets have in cap space. And also, again, some of these numbers could fluctuate with the competitiveness of free agency where you get teams bidding against each other. But these are rough numbers to kind of wrap your mind around here for the New York Jets and their free agency. Richard Sherman, a little less than $10 million a year. Malcolm Butler, again, low flyer deal, $3 or $4 million a year. Brian Poole, last year signed a 1-year deal for $5 million. Quan Alexander, another tier 1. And then overall, just kind of recapping this before we wrap up the fixing the New York Jets is let's recap what the Jets actually would have done in my free agency fix the New York Jets plan. They add an absolute tier 1 free agent, Joe Thune, one of the best players available overall in the market at a critical position of need. I think interior offensive line is so huge for the Jets. And again, the ripple effects, he's a proven winner, a former Super Bowl champion. That's the kind of guy you want to have in your locker room. So I would pay the money for Joe Thune. A couple of intriguing pass rushers. Again, I think the Jets need to double dip here one way or another. If you're not a Lawson Hendrickson guy, maybe you're a Romeo Okwara guy, maybe you're a Bud Dupree, maybe you're a Shaq Barrett, whatever your flavor is, I think we can all agree the Jets need edge rushers. Now, number 1 wide receiver, I don't think that's really out there in free agency outside of Kenny Galladay. Juju Smith-Schuster is a good scheme fit, but a lot of people are kind of questioning the tick-tock in his mind and whether he's really in it, and the invisibility factor last year where he just kind of was missing from the offense. He had a lot of great statistics, but there were times where he just wasn't there, and you're like, wow, where is Juju Smith-Schuster? I don't know if I want that kind of guy on the team. So Curtis Samuel, again, not a true number 1, but again, kind of gives you another weapon on offense. I think it'd be a nice Swiss Army knife. Kenyon Drake, cheap scheme fit at running back. I think they're going to get a high upside guy at tight end. Again, Gerald Everett is my guy, but you can really go a lot of different options to kind of provide a Batman to the Robin at the tight end position. CJ Beathard, again, schematic backup quarterback, makes a lot of sense. You could also see them going with a more high upside guy, maybe a Jacoby Brissett, who is a bit more starting experience. Corner, I think, again, you either retain Poole or a guy like K'Wan Williams of the 49ers is the guy they could replace that slot corner with if they can't get to an agreement with Brian Poole. Richard Sherman, again, veteran experience, familiar with the scheme, and makes a lot of sense. And also the New York thing. I think Richard Sherman's his podcast with Chris Collinsworth. He could use the extra pub being in a bigger market. That makes a lot of sense. And again, I think a lot of these are going to also be supplemented through the NFL draft. Joe Douglas said supplement free agency with the draft. Either way, I think they're going to dip at a lot of these positions. Again, outside of offensive tackle, I hope they draft the developmental right tackle for the future. Again, when you look at this for the New York Jets, they've got a ton of needs, but you can't fill everything in one free agency class. You can't build Rome in a day. These are the things I would like to do. I want to give a couple honorable mentions here of moves I considered, but again, you just can't sign everybody. What I would do on the offensive line, again, honorable mention, is Corey Linsley. If the Jets can double dip and get Joe Thune and Corey Linsley, this offensive line goes from mediocre to average, from that ballpark to like elite. Like they would jump into top 10. Think about that. Mckay Beckton, Joe Thune. You'd have Corey Linsley, Connor McGovern kicks to right guard, and then you have George Fant. That is fantastic. That is terrific. It'll open holes in the running game. It'll provide whoever's playing quarterback elite bouncers, elite security guards in front of them. So I would love that. That to me would be fantastic. A huge upgrade on the offensive line. Honorable mention of almost a place I would have almost went. Wide receiver, going a little different, going all in on a Kenny Galladay. Again, I just don't think Joe Douglas is going to spend that kind of money in free agency on Kenny Galladay. I could see him swinging high and doing like a Brashad Perriman incentive-laden deal. Will Fuller obviously is going to get more money than Brashad Perriman got, but a lot of those incentive kind of things. If he hits this or this or this or plays this many games, I put playing time incentives for Will Fuller with his history of missing games in every season he's ever played. He's never played a full season. So I would put incentive late-ins there, or Juju Smith-Schuster. So that's an honorable mention of a different way they could attack wide receiver. Edge, again, I think there's so many names. I think we all agree they're going to dip twice. Who are the guys? Is it Romeo Quar? Is it Carl Lawson? Is it Trey Hendrickson? Is it Bud Dupree? Is it Shaq Barrett? They need to invest heavily, and I think they will with Robert Saleh's influence. And then the other thing I could potentially do at corner, instead of going like a Richard Sherman and a guy like Malcolm Butler or K'Wan Williams or Brian Poole, is going a little bit more primo at the position. Shaquille Griffin of the Seattle Seahawks will be available. Maybe they'll go a little higher on the hog to pay that kind of price. I'm not sure if they're going to or not, because I feel like there's so many other needs on this team. Boom, everybody. That's it. That's the Fix the New York Jets free agency plan by yours truly, Boy Green. We've got the legal tampering period coming on Monday, free agency next Wednesday. It's an exciting time to be a Jets fan. Is there a free agent I missed? Like, Paul, how did you not add this guy on your list? Or is there a guy that you love that I picked? Give me thumbs up. Give me comments. Give me feedback, whether on social media. You can find me anywhere at BoyGreen25, BOY, Green the Color 25, or here on the YouTube channel. Make sure you comment down below who I missed, who I didn't, and, of course, here on the channel, every signing that you will have, I'll have experts on to break down the signings, how they fit with the Jets, all that coming next week. Busy time for the New York Football Jets, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into this video, for fixing the New York Jets. And boy, things are about to get real spicy here on One Jets Drive.